COVID-19 is an international issue. It has been from the beginning. In the United States, we've seen a tremendous response from national health guidance to an accelerated process to make a vaccine available to the general public. But not all parts of the world have access to the vaccine. We'll talk about that and other issues today. Responding to COVID-19 is a part of Allergy and Asthma Network's mission to end the needless death and suffering due to asthma, allergies, and related conditions through outreach, education, advocacy, and research. This is Sally Schessler, Director of Education for the network, and this is the 31st webinar in our COVID-19 webinar series as we work to present scientific and practical information that relates to you and your life. Today, we welcome back the medical expert for our webinar series, Dr. Purvi Parikh. Dr. Parikh is an adult and pediatric allergist and immunologist at Allergy and Asthma Associates of Murray Hill. She is currently on faculty as clinical assistant professor in both departments of medicine and pediatrics at New York University School of Medicine. She has been passionate about health policy and is on the board of directors of the Advocacy Council of the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. Dr. Parikh is a spokesperson for the Allergy and Asthma Network. She frequently makes appearances as a medical contributor on our behalf to NBC, Fox, CNN, Wall Street Journal, and CBS. She has her own monthly column in U.S. News and World Report at times. So we're so happy to have you with us today, Dr. Parikh, and we'll hear from you in just a couple of minutes. So we want to take a look at today's outline for the program. And what we are going to be talking about is the current state of COVID-19, vaccination trends. We're going to be looking at treatment trends and also look at global issues. So that all lies ahead of us in the next hour. First thing we'd like to do is find out who is with us today. So we are going to look at a poll question, please. So I want you to be ready to answer this. Which category best describes you? You're going to see the poll come up in just a second here. And I wish we had more categories available to us, but please select the one that best describes you. Are you a physician? Are you a physician assistant? Are you a nurse, a school nurse, a respiratory therapist, asthma educator, health educator, a patient? And again, I wish we had places for professors. I wish we had places for all sorts of other things. But if you can just find what's closest to who you are and what you do, that will be wonderful. We have a great response to these webinars. We had over 600 people registered for today, and that's always very exciting. So if you can get your answers in, we have just about everybody has voted, and let's see who's with us today. We have we're looking at physicians are about 2% of our audience, physicians assistants and nurse practitioners about 4%, nurse and school nurses about 74% of our audience today. And then we have respiratory therapists, asthma educators, and health educators at 14%, and we have 6% of people who are patients. So that's a really nice coordinated group here, and we're really glad that you could join us today. The first thing we're going to talk about then is the current state of COVID-19. This is our Johns Hopkins global map that we check in with every time. This one was put out at 8:21 this morning, so it's nice and up-to-date data. Now, please keep in mind when you're looking at this global map that we're never going to see these numbers go down because they're cumulative numbers. But it's very tragic to see that there have been a total of 239 million cases of COVID in the world. And we have seen almost 5 million deaths. And in this, it's, one death is too many, but we certainly are looking at a lot of people that have been affected by this and highly impacted. But the next number in green is kind of the exciting one. And we have seen over 6 billion with a B vaccines administered. And that is a very exciting thing. So this is always available through John Hopkins, and I encourage you to take a look at it. It's got, if we had time to dive deeper, there's a lot of great information here. And the CDC has information for us as well. They report the total cases in the United States at 44 million and over 44 million. And of that, you'll see that 85,000 are new cases, well, 84,000. And the 7-day case rate per 100,000 people is over 180. So we're still seeing deaths. The death numbers are going down. We've seen about 1,820 new deaths. And that information was posted yesterday at the end of the day. So again, very current information that we really, I like sharing with you so that you're up on exactly what's going on out there in the United States and in the world. So in the news, we always like to pick up the news stories from the last week when we do a COVID-19 webinar. And originally, at one point, we were hearing Dr. Fauci say that he didn't even know if things were going to be available for people to be together at Christmas, that he didn't know if that would be safe. But on October 11th, he said, it's a good time to reflect on why it's important to get vaccinated, but get out there and enjoy Halloween as well as the other holidays that will be coming up. I know that people can make some accommodations for Halloween. I know we're going to put a table out front and then sit back on the porch and get to see the children without being right up next to them. And I know a lot of people are going to make some accommodations for that. But the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is considering a proposal to expand vaccines to children as young as 5. That's been in the news. But these younger ones may not have a dose authorized for them until early next year. And that's the word of the former FDA commissioner. And he thinks that it will be years before the CDC recommends making COVID-19 vaccines a part of that regular childhood vaccination schedule, which would open the door to school districts mandating them. So there's been a lot of questions about when that vaccine is available. Will it be a mandate? And I thought that was a very interesting comment. So also in the news is that the Food and Drug Administration is meeting on the Moderna and the J&J boosters. Vote could come by the end of this week. And I thought to myself, you know, one thing that we hear that these things are being approved, but we don't see them right away. So I wanted to go through with you what happens next when something is approved at the FDA level. So first, the FDA has an advisory panel and it recommends you know, yes or no, or who should get something. And so the FDA takes up that recommendation and looks at it. And the commissioner, who in this situation is an acting commissioner, makes the decision and will authorize whether or not boosters should be given and to whom. Then it goes to the CDC, and they have an advisory panel that reviews the FDA recommendation, and then the CDC director issues guidance. And then it goes to the states, and the state health departments generally follow the recommendations of the CDC. Another thing we've been looking at data-wise since the very beginning, I actually update this chart every Monday, and I have since February 28th of 2020. And it's pretty fascinating to see, you know, the ups and the downs of the new cases every day. But we are definitely on a downward turn, which is good news to everyone. You know, you could see that big spike at the end of the year last year, and then we saw the Delta variant spike and stuff, but I'm really hoping we see the numbers continue to come down. And so hopefully people are practicing enough prevention strategies that we will see that happen. So a little word on variants of COVID-19 from the CDC. And the top things that you need to know are that variants are expected. Almost every virus will have a variant in the life of it. But the best way to slow the emergence of new variants is to reduce the spread of infection by taking measures to protect yourself. And that includes getting a COVID-19 vaccine when you are eligible and it's available. Vaccines can help you keep from getting sick, hospitalized, or dying from COVID-19. And all COVID-19 tests can detect all variants, but they won't tell you which variant you have. So if you were to test positive for COVID-19 and you said, okay, is it a variant? Which one? That's something they can't tell you from the test, but they can tell you if you've got something that is within the COVID-19 family. So we're going to go to another another poll question, and this one is going to be, if the COVID-19 booster vaccines become widely available, would you plan to get one? Obviously, I don't know what age group you're in, but if you can please note here, would you be planning to get a COVID vaccine, COVID-19 booster? And certainly there have been a lot of talk about who would be eligible for it. I'm certainly personally in a high risk group, and I'm planning to get my booster, but that's all a personal decision. But you know, I wholeheartedly believe in them. So, but again, we would like to just hear your opinion on, you know, would you get the COVID-19 booster vaccine if it became widely available? So in just a moment, we'll have almost everybody have their votes in. And we so appreciate you taking part in these polls. So here we go. And the answers are overwhelmingly yes. We see 66% of people are saying yes, they would get that COVID booster. 13% said no. 15% hasn't decided yet and might need some more information. And 6% think, I just don't know. And that's a good answer right now too. Certainly things change every day. So I think that that's very interesting though. So next we're going to look at vaccination trends and then treatment trends with Dr. Purvi Parikh. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was muted. So thank you for that great overview. So now moving on to vaccines. As you can see, we luckily have come a long way. We have 187.9 million fully vaccinated, and of those, about 9 million have received the booster dose, myself included, since I'm a healthcare worker. And I got the statistic that over 6 billion people have been vaccinated globally. So that's at least half of the population of humanity has been fully vaccinated at this point. So that's all quite amazing if you think about it in such a short amount of time. And hopefully that gives some people reassurance regarding the vaccine itself, that since so many people have received it, that it is in fact safe and efficacious, as most of the studies have shown. Next slide. And this is another map I really like of the vaccination by state. The darker the green, the better that state is doing. So it's a nice way to kind of get an idea of where you live, what vaccination rates are. And it's no coincidence that the lighter green states are still having a lot of trouble getting COVID under control. Those hospitals are overrun to the point where, you know, unfortunately, individuals are having to be transferred elsewhere. And people can't get routine medical care or other emergencies because of it. So this shows how important vaccinations are. Next slide. And by age group, by far, you know, the elder age group, particularly 75 and up, 65 and up, have been doing very, very well in terms of vaccination compliance, and then followed by 50s and up, 40s and up. And it's very interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing so many elderly individuals admitted, right, or passing away. Now it's the opposite. We're actually seeing, and it's quite sad actually, young, healthy individuals in their 30s, 40s, 20s, not only getting extremely sick with COVID-19, but passing away as well. And it is heartbreaking every single time we hear one of those stories, because it is pretty much largely preventable. Next slide. And this is the exciting news that's on the horizon. You know, Pfizer has asked the FDA to give emergency use approval for the COVID vaccine in age 5 through 12, which will be huge. And I've heard rumblings that some may even be able to start getting the vaccine in the upcoming months. So that's also huge for that age group that's been largely unprotected since now. So it is Similar formulation to the adult, except it's 1/3 the dose of those of the vaccine that's for age 12 and up. So as you know, this is why we do studies in every age group, because the dose that works for one age group might be very different for another. So it will be a 10 microgram dose versus 30 micrograms, and the FDA will meet on that later this month. Next slide. Allergic reactions to COVID-19. So now we finally have good research in highly allergic patients, and it's exactly what all of your friendly allergists believed even before this research existed back in December, that 98% of these individuals had no allergic reaction. In fact, allergic reactions to vaccines is it's very, very rare. You're more likely to be hit by lightning than it occurring. So less than 1% of individuals did have a mild allergic response, such as skin eruptions, flushing, swelling of the tongue, uvular cough, but and even less than that had an anaphylactic reaction or potentially life-threatening reaction. So most people, even with severe food or drug allergies, can safely take the COVID-19 vaccine, which is great news. Next slide. And then myocarditis, another one that got a lot of attention in the media. So in this population-based study of over 2 million individuals who received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, mRNA vaccine, the acute myocarditis was also exceedingly rare, at just 5.8 cases per 1 million. And then after the second dose, the incidence did go up a little bit, but again, it was still very, very rare, one case out of 172,000. And no relationship has been determined between the vaccine and myocarditis. However, if you don't get the vaccine and get the real virus, your risk of myocarditis actually increases. I've seen two different studies, one 16 times as much and one 6 times as much. So ironically, you're actually protecting yourself from myocarditis and by receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. Next slide. So boosters, there was a lot of back and forth on this between the CDC, FDA, and even the government weighed in on their thoughts. But the official recommendations from the CDC, by which pharmacies and hospitals adhere to, is that older adults 50 to 64 with any medical problem, long-term care setting residents 18 and up, people with medical conditions 18 to 49. I know it's confusing because they should just say 18 and up, right? Instead of saying 50 to 64 and then 18 and up. It's purposely, I think, left vague. So you have that discussion with your physician and determine what's right for you. And of course, employees and residents at increased risk for COVID-19 exposure and transmission. So, first responders, healthcare workers, firefighters, education staff, food and agriculture workers, corrections workers, public transport, grocery store workers. Many of you who are probably listening to this call all fall in category of an essential or frontline worker. And factors to be considered are waning immunity, vaccine effectiveness, and of course, global vaccine supply and global and national equity. This has been a big hot topic of discussion, that is it fair that we're giving boosters before much of the world has received even their initial vaccination. The main goal is, we want to protect against hospitalization, severe disease, and of course, death. And again, like everything in this pandemic, the more data we have, of course, the better we'll understand even the need for boosters. Next slide. So considerations in boosting COVID-19 vaccine immune responses. Again, it should be evidence-based, and that's what these recommendations are based on. That's why it's not a blanket, everybody go get one, and it's very specific. And observational studies done so far are preliminary and difficult to interpret. So we need more randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and that's what's underway right now. So NYU, where I'm an investigator, we are doing a booster trial. Cornell is doing booster trials on all the major academic centers. So we should have more information after that. And of course, careful and public scrutiny of all data. And again, it might be appropriate for some individuals who may not have adequate protection, especially immunocompromised folks, such as cancer patients, those with complex medical problems. So, and for them, I wouldn't even call it a booster. I would just call it a third dose, right? Because they didn't respond well to the first 2 doses. So again, available evidence is evolving. It doesn't look like we need one for the general population. Even these high-risk groups are still being largely protected from severe disease, hospitalization, and death. We're trying to be proactive here and get ahead of future variants and declining immunity. Marion Gruber, the director of the FDA Office of Vaccine Research and Review, is set to leave in October, November, as is Phil Krause, and they published their viewpoints in the Lancet, along with other experts worldwide, that the vaccines do still remain highly effective. And so I know it's very confusing to hear all of this conflicting information, but bottom line is, let's keep an eye on the data, which is constantly changing and evolving. And, let's see if that widespread boosting is necessary or not. And, only time will tell. And this just underscores how important it is to have a discussion with your doctor about this.
Dr. Parikh? Just one moment. Dr. Parikh, can you hear us? Dr. Parikh has lost her connection. So I'll just pick up here. The head of the CDC made a directive last week related to the CDC and ACIP advisory panel that was approving distribution of Pfizer's booster shots. And Dr. Walensky signed off on a whole series of recommendations from the panel, including distribution of the shots to older Americans and also those with underlying medical conditions. But she did break from the panel by clearing boosters for those in high-risk occupational and institutional settings, which was an unusual decision, and it is likely to influence the national conversation on vaccines and booster shots. So what it really comes down to is, as a patient or a provider, what do we do with the conflicting guidance that we're seeing? And I think it's very important, just as Dr. Parikh was saying, is that we're getting new data all of the time. We really, we're seeing new things come out and new things, that we're seeing every day. And I would just like to say that I think what we do as patients is that we speak to our providers. And we're going to be counting on our providers to have that current information, that up-to-date, evidence-driven information. And as a provider, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're really looking for that information, so that we can help make sure that we can help help patients really dig through what they're hearing on media and elsewhere. So I think that's really the ticket, is making sure that we're really paying attention to the evidence and not just like, the everyday noise out there, if you want to put it that way. Well, when it comes to treatment trends, treatments used for COVID-19 should be prescribed by your healthcare provider. That's very important. And Dr. Parikh is back. So,
hi, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It looks like I lost my internet connection. I apologize.
Well, take you back to the question that we were looked at the end of that section. And as a patient or provider, what I was saying is that as a patient, you should rely on your provider to have the evidence-based information that you would need to make a decision, and that providers should be keeping up with the evidence that's coming in on a daily basis. Is there anything you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very important to have these individual discussions. Of course, watching the data is extremely important, but these are all guidelines, right? And even the data is meant to be modified to your specific situation. So it's always best to sit down and discuss it one-on-one, because everybody is different, and only you and your physician can have that shared decision-making discussion. But, with that, we can start talking about some of the treatment trends. So, the issues are that, treatments used for COVID-19 should be prescribed by your healthcare provider. And people have been seriously harmed and even died after taking products not approved for COVID-19, even products approved for other uses. So again, please sit down with your physician who knows you, who knows your medical conditions, and who is, up to date on the emerging data, and don't try to treat yourself. Even me as a doctor, I don't treat myself for this reason. It's very hard to make objective decisions for yourself. Next slide. And then there's a lot of treatment issues too. So your healthcare worker may recommend the following to relieve symptoms and support your body's natural defenses. So acetaminophen, ibuprofen, to reduce fever. Hydration is important, like with any virus, IV fluids, and then getting plenty of rest to help your body fight the virus. But of course, if you're having warning signs, please go into the emergency room or call 911. Trouble breathing, chest pain or pressure, confusion, inability to wake or stay awake, and then bluish lips or face. Monoclonal antibodies, I think, are great and a game changer, especially if you take them within 72 hours, because they have been shown to help keep people out of the hospital. So if you do start developing symptoms that are progressing, please speak to your physician immediately so that they can prescribe the monoclonal antibody treatment if it is indicated for you. And again, the sooner you take it, the better, and the less likely it is that you will end up in the hospital. Next slide. And who should get it? So of course, those within less than 10 days, people who've been exposed and at risk for severe illness. So it can even be used like prophylactically for those individuals that are high risk. And we have various infusion therapies. Some are shot, some are IV, and you can discuss with your physician which one may be the best for you and the timing of this treatment. Next slide. So again, they're usually given at an infusion site, either outpatient or in the hospital. And there are also treatments available for those who are hospitalized. So this may be given to certain people exposed to COVID-19 as a protection against the virus, including those undergoing chemotherapy or organ transplant. So if you're at higher risk, you may be given one of these treatments even before you develop symptoms if you live with or have been around someone who has COVID-19 or severe COVID-19. Now, what's been a hot topic since last week is the Merck pill. This pill can be, I think, will be a huge tool in our armamentarium. It's an antiviral pill. It also reduces symptoms and speeds up recovery. And the company predicts it will cut the hospitalizations and death in half. And this is a pill, right, as opposed to an infusion. So it'll be much easier for patients, hopefully, to get access to and to take. This also has to be taken within the first 5 days of the onset of symptoms, but it's huge for people who don't have access to the monoclonal antibodies, for areas of the world where not everybody has had access to vaccines. So it's very exciting that we have all of these therapeutic options now, and hopefully it will be approved soon. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Sally to go over some of the global issues.
Sounds good. And I'd just like to assure everyone that Dr. Parikh will be around after this section to help answer questions. So there have been quite a few global concerns, and Allergy and Asthma Network tends to have our vision on a more global picture a lot of the time. Our president and CEO, Tonya Winders, is also president of the Global Patient Advocacy Group. So we do have a lot of global vision as a part of what we do. And there's a statement that came out with the World Health Organization and several other global organizations that really talked about what the concerns are on a global level. And one of the biggest is that there's been a dramatic loss of human life across the world. And we saw that in the Johns Hopkins data earlier. It is, we haven't seen something like that, at least I haven't in my lifetime. And it creates some unprecedented challenges to the public health infrastructure, to food systems, and to that whole world of work, the whole economic condition. And we've seen devastating economic and social disruption across the entire world. For the economic issues, nearly half of the world's 3.3 billion people in the global workforce, they've been at risk of losing their livelihoods. We've certainly seen that in the United States as well. But so many things closed, it affected so many people and through the whole supply chain. The informal economy workers have been particularly vulnerable. They lack social protection. They lack access to quality health care. And they also had a loss of access to productive assets. So many have been unable to feed their families during lockdowns. When you have no income, you have less food or no food available to your family. So countries that are dealing with existing humanitarian crises or emergencies are particularly exposed to the effects of COVID-19. And when we want to be responding swiftly to the pandemic while ensuring that humanitarian and recovery assistance reaches those most in need. And this is just a critical concept for us to really have on the forefront of what we do. Just to kind of give you an idea from the US and global perspectives, on the left side of the screen, you'll see the hotspots for the vaccine. You'll see it on the first for the US above and for the global hotspots below. But on the right side of the screen, you see the effective vaccinations, the vaccination rates. So the darker areas have a higher level of vaccination. So it's really interesting to see, where do you see a lot of COVID-19 versus where are you seeing the higher levels of vaccination. So what should be our priorities as we look at the whole global picture? One is addressing underlying food security and malnutrition challenges. We need to make sure people have access to food. We may need to think about tackling rural poverty through more and better jobs in the rural economy. We need to make sure social protection is extended to all. We need to look at safe migration pathways and facilitate those. And we also want to promote the formalization of that informal economy. We also, being a health organization, looked at what some of the needs were identified by Doctors Without Borders. And that organization had two main needs that they see, or two major needs. And that is equitable global access to COVID vaccines, treatment, and tests. And also calling on the US to share their surplus COVID vaccines with those who've been left out of the global vaccine rollout. So we very rarely in our polling questions ask an opinion question, but we decided to do that today. So what we decided to ask is, in your opinion, so again, remember, all these questions are anonymous. In your opinion, should the United States use surplus vaccine to start administering boosters or to send to countries with a largely unvaccinated population? And you can select yes, no, that you don't have an opinion, or you need more information to answer this question. So if you could go ahead and mark what your answer would be. Again, nobody will ever know what it was that you said. And so, I just want you to keep in mind that, again, this is just opinion. This isn't anything more. But we just thought it would be very, very interesting to see, what your opinions are at this point in time. And of course, with opinions, we know that that can change tomorrow. So, okay, we're seeing almost half of everyone has voted. We'll give it just another minute or two so that we can see these are tough issues. And again, this pandemic is unprecedented, and there's no playbook for how we're supposed to be thinking about things or doing things. And that's why we just keep pursuing the evidence. So let's look and see what everyone had to say. And 49% of everyone said yes, that they would, what they think the US should be using their surplus for. 21% no, 7% said no opinion, and 23% said I need more information to answer this question. And this is kind of a new thing, so I totally understand that. Okay, so now it's time to go to your questions, and we'll take as many of these as we can in the time that we have left. So we're going to start with a question of Dr. Parikh, why don't we have more information out there about natural immunity to COVID-19?
So actually now we are getting more information. So part of the issue was that we needed to see it play out, right? Because we couldn't really give information on how long it lasts or how durable it is until time had passed and we can continue to study these individuals. So almost every center I know is studying natural immunity, and now we do have actually very good information. So some information that we have is that, the nice thing about natural immunity is that you get immunity to kind of all parts of the virus instead of just the spike protein alone, like what happens with the vaccine. However, the spike protein is the most important part to have immunity to, because that's what kind of invades your cells. The other big information that we learned is that people with natural immunity and who get at least one dose of the vaccine have very, very good immunity, meaning it's like they may only need one dose. And again, it's not an official recommendation, but we're learning that as we have more information, as more time elapses. However, the main issue with natural immunity is that it's very variable. So I even have patients of my own who have lost antibody responses. So that is why we still advocate for individuals to get the vaccine. Maybe we might change that in the future to just one dose of the vaccine, or when we have better tests to assess natural immunity, you may not need it immediately. So all of that will come, but for now, it's best to protect yourself, especially with new variants emerging.
Okay, Noreen has an excellent question. If the tests can't tell you what variant you have, how do they know what variant is on the rise?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So each individual test won't tell you that, but all tests that are collected, those samples then go to the CDC, the Department of Public Health in your state, and then those labs test for variants. So like New York Department of Public Health will get probably thousands of test samples today, right? And then they'll be able to tell, okay, out of today's batch, Delta is the most prominent, or Alpha, or, if there's a new one down the line. So it is still being tracked, just not on an individual basis.
That's interesting information. I didn't know that. Okay, we have another question. Is it better to get a different vaccine than the one originally received when you're getting a booster shot?
So that's also interesting because some information on that is just emerging as well, and the FDA will be discussing that this month. Actually, it's called heterologous boosting, and there is some data that shows that it may help to mix and match vaccines because it kind of keeps your immune system on its toes, and it might produce a better immune response because your body is not getting used to the same type of shot. However, even with the same shots, we're still showing very robust and good immunity against severe disease. So I know I sound like a broken record, but time will tell, like with everything. And the good news is the FDA is going to be discussing this very topic in a few weeks. So we should have official say on it.
Oh, excellent. Okay, our next question, it's kind of a little bit of a scenario. I have a friend who suffers from an autoimmune disorder and is hesitant to get the vaccine due to fears with the side effects causing more issues for her. Her doctor suggested does not get the vaccine. Is this a genuine concern for this population?
So generally speaking, and I don't know your friend's specifics because I obviously am not treating that person, but generally speaking, it's not a concern for those with autoimmune diseases. We found actually that there is no increase in autoimmunity or no danger with getting it. And if anything, these individuals need it more than someone who doesn't have an autoimmune disease because they're often on medicines that suppress their immune system and they're at higher risk of all infections, not just COVID. So generally no, but again, I don't know this person's specifics. There might be another reason that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to answer specific patient questions on a national webinar. So the next question, is there a reduced dose for those who have had COVID? Studies show only one dose is recommended, but that does not meet fully vaccinated requirements.
Yes, so that's what I was alluding to in the natural immunity question. So I think those guidelines will also be coming out soon. So it may be that not both are required, that just one is. But the official guidance is not there yet on that. So it's still, you still need both doses, or you can opt for the one dose J&J if you're someone who has had COVID.
Okay. And the next question is another interesting one. If you had the Moderna vaccine, can you get a Pfizer booster? I think you addressed that, but I just wanted to make sure that we answered it specifically. Dr. Parikh, I'm wondering if we lost her
Oh,
again.
sorry. You
There you
actually
are.
can because in the official recommendations, they say try to get the same shot. But if it's unavailable, especially if you're someone who's immunocompromised, it's okay to get one of the other mRNA vaccines. But again, we will have more guidance again on mixing the two, for the general population after, I believe, October 16th or 17th, they're meeting on this very topic, the FDA.
Okay. Do you know what's in the Merck pill? That's the
So
next question.
yeah, so it's a antiviral that targets COVID. So just like we have a flu antiviral and like a herpes antiviral, this antiviral is combats the SARS-CoV-2 virus specifically. So if you take it early, it can significantly lower your viral load. And it might be used preventatively, like we do with the flu as well, where we give it to high risk people who've been exposed.
Okay, here's a question. How do we know who to trust regarding the safety of the vaccine? I have 5 daughters and I'm concerned about their future health. I think a lot of people have that kind of question. So I'd love to have you address that, Dr. Parikh.
Yeah, I mean, the first and foremost, is to listen to their physicians, your own personal physician, but also, the national, guidelines in terms of like the doctors that are with the CDC, the NIH, they really are, to be honest, like unbiased. They are not being paid off by pharma. They're not allowed to, actually. They can't even accept a pen or anything from these pharmaceutical companies because they work for these institutions. So I would trust them, trust the science, trust the data. I hope you trust us at the Allergy and Asthma Network. We would not lead you astray. And I do understand the concern, but I wouldn't preach something I don't practice myself. So I've had the vaccine and the booster. All of my loved ones have, and they're all women of all varying ages, from 12 and up. So I feel very secure in the data. And if you look at the actual virus, it's far, far worse and far scarier. So just have that perspective that the virus, those side effects are far worse than the vaccine, long term too.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing about your personal story, because at Allergy and Asthma Network, we all have families. We all have things going on. I've got a very, very good friend whose daughter is expecting. And at the very beginning of her pregnancy, the answer was kind of like, I don't know if the pregnant woman should be getting the vaccine. And then later in the pregnancy, it was like, yes, 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 you should be getting the vaccine. So again, we're learning as we go, but we're all making personal decisions for ourselves and our families too. And I think that and that's important. And what we're doing, we're going back to the science. And again, we're really trying to see what's the latest evidence, and then we want to share that with you as well. Okay, the next question is, how are the variants more dangerous when I thought normally a virus weakens and doesn't become stronger?
That's a great question. So yes, in certain cases, it can weaken. The issue, though, is this is a brand new virus that our immune system has never been exposed to before. So normally, let's say the flu mutates or other viruses mutate, other coronaviruses that we've been exposed to for hundreds of thousands of years, our immune system can adapt and be nimble. But this is one it is not only mutating, but then it's infecting people who haven't even been vaccinated yet. So they, of course, get very severe forms of it. And the virus finds ways to survive. It's actually very smart. So, until we can get ahead of the immunity puzzle, either by vaccination or, enough individuals vaccinated and exposed, some of these variants may be more dangerous, you know, because they have to find ways to evade what we call host immune responses.
Okay, next question is, will they make a booster with variant mRNA for better protection?
Yes, actually, and those studies are underway. So I know Moderna has a few variant-specific shots that are under study, and I believe Pfizer does too. So that they are studying that as well to see if that's better protection, you know, even than the shot we currently have.
Well, you've spoken to our next question to some degree, but I'm still going to just pose it in order to reinforce the information. The question is, if the new pill greatly reduces the side effects and danger of COVID, do we still need to get immunized?
Yes, absolutely, because no infection is still better than mild infection, especially when I'm seeing tons of COVID long haulers that either had asymptomatic infections or very mild infections, but now a year later, they're not able to work or go to school. So you're still better off having zero infection because there's still long-term effects even from mild COVID infections.
Okay, our next question comes from Pamela. It says, what about the younger population who are concerned about fertility issues? Is there any link to vaccines and fertility, or is this a rumor?
Yeah, so I can very happily say that this is a complete rumor. We now have data on tens and thousands of pregnant women who either were not pregnant prior to the vaccine and now are, or were pregnant when they received the vaccine and safely delivered with no harm to themselves or the newborn. So it is extremely safe. There's no medical plausible way it can even cause fertility issues. And again, talking about myself as a woman of childbearing age that's trying to start a family, I actually got vaccinated just so I could start planning, because what we found is we've seen in August the highest amount of pregnant women die from COVID-19 who were and all were unvaccinated. So I want to give myself and hopefully my future family a fighting chance. So the data is clear. There is zero effect on fertility.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Our next question, is it true that some of the treatments for ulcerative colitis could protect you against the virus?
Yes, there is some data that, because so much of the virus is inflammation related. So a lot of these anti-inflammatory treatments may be helpful, but again, it's another thing that we just don't have enough data on quite yet.
Okay, here's another interesting question. There's so many interesting questions today. I'm kind of fascinated by them. This one says, are there certain blood types that respond better immunity-wise to the COVID-19 vaccine? Dr. Parikh? We've lost her again, unfortunately. There must be some issues in New York City with connectivity. Luckily, she's had a chance to answer a lot of our questions. And I think just to close things up for the day, I think, just really pay attention to information from the CDC and pay attention to information from the FDA. This is where we're getting information that has been through rigorous review, and so it's just really important to really think about where do you want to get your information. Be ever so careful about Googling things, about just looking in a search engine and looking to see what comes up. There are a lot of great places for information. I know I use quite a few of them, but think about using a healthcare system or the CDC for your information. So I would just like to finish up today by asking you to join us for our upcoming webinar. We're so glad you listened today. We're going to remain committed to bringing you that information that you need during pandemic. But our next webinar is going to be on creating healthy indoor spaces at home, school, and work for those with allergy and asthma. That's on October 20th. And if you can join us at 4 p.m. Eastern, we would love to have you with us. So thank you again for joining us. This is Sally Schessler for the staff at Allergy and Asthma Network. We'd appreciate it if you take 2 to 3 minutes to complete the evaluation survey that's going to pop up right at the conclusion of the webinar. We do look carefully at that data. Well, we work hard to bring you the latest information during the COVID-19 pandemic so we can all breathe better together. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope you have a great day.